So our Hall of Distinguished Alumni is a special moment, not only on our homecoming calendar, but on the university calendar as well. And this luncheon is a special opportunity for WKU alumni and friends to recognize those within the WKU family who have achieved at the highest levels in their professional careers and their personal lives. There is no higher honor that this university can bestow on one of our own than induction into the Hall of Distinguished Alumni. We've just recognized our past inductees who are with us today, and in the program and at your table you'll see a complete list of all of our distinguished alumni members. So take a moment to think about the significance of the achievements of these individuals and the impact they have had on our Commonwealth, on our nation, and throughout the globe. It's truly awe-inspiring to recognize the breadth and depth of the contributions that so many of in our Hilltopper family have made, not only in their lives, but in all of our lives, and in the lives and careers of thousands of people with whom they're associated, who they have taught, led, mentored. And if our students are looking for role models in what we do every day on our campus to provide higher education for our students, then you can look no further than those who have been inducted into this Hall of Distinguished Alumni for an example. The selection process is always a difficult task, and I want to commend our Alumni Association Board of Directors for once again doing an outstanding job with this year's selections. And so I will start with the newest members to be inducted into the WKU Hall of Distinguished Alumni. They include a beloved athletic trainer, an esteemed appeals court chief judge, and a highly regarded educator and university administrator. It is my privilege to recognize today's inductees, and then following a brief video introduction of each, Alumni Association Brian Basinger will join me right here for the plaque presentation and photos. Tonight, this afternoon's inductees begin with Bill Edwards, better known as Doc E. Right here. Bill Edwards is among the most highly respected athletic trainers in that profession across American higher education, and it doesn't matter whether it's education or professional sports. He's recognized at all levels among athletic trainers. Bill has been a fixture in WKU athletics since he came here as a student in 1970. Not to date you, Bill, but 1970. We've been fortunate that he has devoted his entire career to the field of athletic training, and he's done it at his alma mater, where he has impacted the lives of thousands of student athletes and student trainers that he has mentored. In his nomination letter, Matt Coleman wrote, "Coaches, athletic directors, and athletic conferences have changed, but Bill Edwards has been found at Smith Stadium for over 40 years, now Halcyon Smith Stadium. Doc has achieved legendary status on the Hill, and that is absolutely the case." Others who wrote to support Bill's nomination describe the impact he has had on their lives, many of whom have gone on to build distinguished careers of their own as athletic trainers, taking their example from that which they received from Doc Edwards. They referred to Bill as a role model, confident, mentor, and father figure, and nearly all commented on his devotion to his family and certainly his dedication to WKU. One wrote, "Doc E treats everyone with compassion, respect, and equally without bias," and said that Bill's motto was always be professional, and Bill has certainly lived that motto every day. We are pleased today to recognize and say thank you to one of our own. So now if you turn your attention to the screens on either end of the room, let's honor Doc E. Edwards.
A leader by example, Billy T. Doc E. Edwards has mended, mentored, and motivated the lives of WKU student athletes, coaches, and fans for nearly 4 decades. A Franklin, Kentucky native, Edwards' choice to assist his high school football coach as a manager-trainer rather than a player would chart the course of his professional career.
He enrolled us into a Kramer student trainer course, correspondence course. We had to send things in for like 6 weeks. It was really kind of fun, but I've still got that manual. This would be 1966, and it's amazing what's in that journal today, dating back. Some things we still use, and obviously a lot of things we don't. But Coach asked us to do that, so I did that. So I did that all through high school. And my senior year in high school, coach had left at that point in time, had a new head coach that year, and he asked me at the end of the year, he said, have you thought about doing this in college? And I said, really hadn't thought about that. I want to go to Western Kentucky University.
In the fall of 1970, Edwards became one of 3 student trainers for the WKU football team under then-coach Jimmy Fikes and the university's first full-time trainer, Russell Miller. In 1974, he received a Bachelor of Science degree in physical education and completed a Master's in secondary and health education in 1976, becoming a third-generation WKU graduate. He was named a WKU assistant athletic trainer a year later. In 1983, he took the reins as head athletic trainer and since 2010 serves as associate athletic director and director of athletic training and sports medicine for the Hilltoppers. Scores of athletes credit Edwards for his compassion, caring, and most importantly, for keeping them in the game.
A lot of times as an athlete, you want to get back out. You don't want to lose your position, and you want to go back out, and you try and go work one over on Doc, and Doc's not having it. You know, you can try every little angle you can to get out of it, but he won't allow that to happen, you know, and Doc's always right, you know, so he's never wrong.
I tried to treat them all the same, tried to take care of them the best I could, try to let them recover from their injuries with our team physicians that have been so great to me, to help them be as healthy as they could be when they got finished playing.
In Edwards' time at Western, the program has grown to a staff of 12 certified athletic trainers and access to a large group of sports medicine specialists, providing state-of-the-art health care to WKU student athletes. Among them, former WKU player and team doctor Craig Beard.
Bill is probably the poster child for a servant leader. He engages people, and what he invests in people, they give back to him tenfold. So the people that he's around, his trainers, his staff, they are so loyal to him that it's not something that you can garner by basically bossing people. He garners respect by the respect he has for the people he takes care of.
No one was more responsible for that national championship team than Bill Doc Edwards, wife Jenny, daughter Faith, and Rachel. They were truly an inspiration for me and an inspiration for that team to get through some tough times and to win games and stay with it and forge ahead. And so my hat is tipped to my deep friend and ally, Bill Doc Edwards.
Edwards is certified as a licensed athletic trainer with the National Athletic Trainers Association and through the State of Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure. In 2011, he was inducted into the Kentucky Athletic Trainers Society Hall of Fame. A member of the Hilltopper Halls of History Committee, he was named Volunteer of the Year for the Alumni W Club and continues to teach in the Department of Kinesiology, Recreation, and Sport at WKU. He is a member of Phi Delta Theta, and along with his wife, 2 daughters, and son-in-laws, boast 8 WKU degrees in the family. And while Doc Edwards' reputation in the sports arena complements the university's nationally recognized athletic programs, it is his dedication and love of WKU that transcends his expertise.
Doc, I love you. This is well-deserved. You just don't know how many lives you've touched over the years. You're special to all Hilltoppers. You're the man, and love you so much and appreciate you so much, and go Tops.
2016 Hall of Distinguished Alumni inductee, Bill Doc E. Edwards.
Well, I was doing great till watched that video. That makes it tough. But I'm about to get back there, I think. Dr. Ransdale, Brian, distinguished guests, fellow alumni, family and friends. It's with a great deal of pride and a great deal of humility that I accept this award today. I'm extremely honored to be inducted into this Hall of Distinguished Alumni with many of my heroes and so many remarkable and talented individuals that we have in this group. Thanks to the Alumni Board for considering me, and to my former student trainer, Matt Coleman, for making my nomination take place. Congrats to Judge Emberton and Dr. Travelstead's family. I'm tickled to be with you guys today, and looking forward to your all's addresses as well. Well, 26 years ago, do y'all know what that is? I was out practicing this morning, and my family couldn't find me, and they said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Out practicing the Gettysburg Address." But I came to campus at that point in time, and what a special place this is, huh? I've always thought that I was at the best place in the world, the only place to be, the only place I ever wanted to be. Doc Miller tried to get me to come to Michigan one time, but I just couldn't do it. I've kept an article over the years, Dr. Lowell Harrison addressing the topic of the Western spirit that many of you have heard and described by Dr. Downing and many others. And Dr. Harrison said in that article, as I quote, "There's a spirit of the Hill, but it's hard to define. Certainly a part of it is contained in the school motto, 'The Spirit makes the master,' and it manifests itself to those who are tuned to recognize it." He mentioned you might see it and feel it on campus at different things. He said you might see it at a Larnell Harris concert. You might feel it when Dickie Moore ran down the field for a Western touchdown, or Brandon Dowdy threw a touchdown pass, or you might see it on a fast break in Diddle Arena, or you might feel it when you hear the fight song. I think it's a feeling of love, loyalty, and school spirit that can't be matched by other schools. It makes your heart glad and makes tears come to your eyes. My dear friend Eck Branham said that Dr. Cherry instilled it in him. They had a meeting one day when Dr. Cherry was asking Eck if he thought we could beat Murray in football. And Eck said, "I think we can." And Dr. Cherry went on to elaborate why Eck didn't have the spirit with him at the time. So Eck later said, "Dr. Cherry put it in me," and he said, "I've tried to get it out, and I can't get it out." I really believe it's contagious. I think I caught it when my dad, Bill Kinslow, and my granddad, B.J. White, both football lettermen, brought me to football games. And I've got this crazy, vivid memory, which my wife says is really useless, but for the things that are most important in life, at least. But I specifically remember catching the Western spirit when I watched our quarterback, Sharon Miller, who's going into our Athletic Hall of Fame tomorrow, catch a throwback pass down the left sideline, on the home sideline, you all know where I'm talking about, toward the library. And he caught a pass from halfback Dr. Jim Burt. That's a throwback where you give it to the halfback, and he throws it back to the quarterback. Nobody knows he's going out for a pass. So he caught that in 1963. I think that's when I caught it. I also learned a tune to stand up and cheer about that time. I started humming that when I got home. I think what attracted me to the band and that singing, though, was the Silver Girls marching down the field, if those of you who know what I'm talking about there. I'd like to spend my allotted time today, and I am going to make it short. Tracy's been on me about how long to talk, and I told her I'd been studying Romeo Cornell's 45-minute speech, and I was going to try to stay right under Romeo. But I am going to try to move along here pretty quickly. I'd like to spend the rest of my time thanking those folks that put me here today and who do have the spirit. First of all, to Doc Russ Miller, my mentor, my role model, a guy that I patterned my career after, someone I wanted to be like, the one that started our athletic training program that I've tried to carry on for the last 40 years. I'm so thankful that he asked me to be on the staff that year in the fall of 1970. And there were 5 of us then, counting Russ. Mike, Gentle Ben Swift, who just retired over in Glasgow from EMS work. Gary Ebling, Nelson Pruitt, and my famous roommate from Tompkinsville, Bill Squeaky Kendall, that I continue to share brotherhood with. My first full-time colleagues, Ron Dunn and Pam Hereford, especially Pam, for all your support she's given me over the years. Pam and I are both from Franklin, graduated from the same high school, started our full-time jobs together, was later my supervisor. Her niece is my sister-in-law. Other than that, we have nothing in common. To Coach John Oldham, my first athletic director who hired me and taught me so much, and I want to mention Dr. David Dunn, Dr. Birch Oglesby, and Dr. Thad Cruz, who have been my department heads for my faculty duties over the years. To Coach Jimmy Fikes, one of my heroes. Taught me how to be a Westerner, demonstrated Western Kentucky class in everything he did. It's proof that successful coaches can also be great human beings. Coach epitomized that. How fortunate to get to work with him for 14 football seasons and to been able to be his last athletic trainer for football. Jenny and I are thankful for having been part of his and Frankie's football family and their graciousness to include us. I sure wish he was here with us today, but I know without a doubt where he is. He's looking down upon these proceedings. And I'm thankful for Frankie and Jeff for coming today. Coach Jim Richards, my first year working. After football, I went to basketball, and his kindness in working with a rookie athletic trainer. Tried to tell me how to take care of ankles. Told me to put our starting forward in a brown paper sack with vinegar, that was the way you treated sprained ankles. So I just shook my head like this and went on and did what I wanted to. I was his last athletic trainer also. Seems to be a trend here about bringing coaches to retirement. I'm not sure about that, but I was Gene Cady and Clem Haskins' first athletic trainer too. To Coach Butch Gilbert, another hero and role model. He's my buddy, my dear, dear, dear friend who couldn't be here today, but he's represented by his family. The Big B, as we all know him, has been like a second father to me. To Colonel Mickey Riggs, along with Coach Fikes and Coach Gilbert, made up the three amigos that Coach Harbaugh called them back when they went on mission to save football back in 1992. He and Miss Margaret and family have been very kind to the Edwards family. To Dr. Dero Downing, I still have my letter from him telling me I'd been hired in 1977. And if any of you all got to participate in that letter from him when you got hired, if you remember, he always asked for a photo. He wanted to have a shot of you so he could put it in his file so you know what you look like. We're indeed grateful to have been able to call the Downing family our friends over the years. I've been Miss Harriet's personal athletic trainer on a couple of occasions, although she calls me her doctor. Jenny and I are so thankful that our two daughters were able to work with the College Heights Foundation with Alex and Donald and those great ladies up there, and that they got to spend very special and precious time with Dr. and Mrs. Downing. To Wes and Sue Strader for being such great friends and supporters. Wes got us into our first home. No, not sure how he worked that deal. And he and Sue helped us get to our church. Jenny always said she felt better when I was on road trips and she could hear Wes mention my name on the radio, even though that meant somebody was hurt and I had to go out on the field. Special thanks to Jack Harbaugh, one of my dearest friends on earth, his wife Jackie, who we love dearly. Words cannot express what they've meant to our family. To my old buddy Paul Just, my dear friend, my second SID, Ed Given broke me in, had a year to break me in, and then I broke Paul in. My W Club colleague, my former road trip roommate, thanks for all your help and support, Paul. To all my team physicians and their families that I could not have done without, who voluntarily dedicated themselves to providing care for all our sports teams and who educated me, took care of me. No one really understands that relationship that has to exist between the athletic trainer and the team physician and how much they go above and beyond the call of duty. I want to, all my team docs, and I would be remiss I'd leave somebody out. I do want to especially thank my three medical directors that I've had over this 40 years. Dr. Bob Goodwin was my first, Dr. Craig Beard, and Dr. David Richards. Those three guys I share a bond with that only we understand. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Appreciate you much. To Brian Fisher, my team RN, my right-hand man, especially on road trips, and to Cindy Hudson, my team physical therapist. To all my staff members, past and present, who were and are the best. Special thanks to those that had to put up with me for the most years, Randy Deere and Mike Gaddy and Paul Upright, Sherry Harris-Oots and Dustin Wilson. And then to all my student trainers, whom in the tough times really were the only reason for hanging in there sometimes. When you have them around, you just couldn't stay down. Couldn't have done it for 40 years without them, and I think there's a couple hundred of those guys out there now. Several of them made the trip today, and I'm so appreciative of you guys coming. To my mom and dad, Bill and Patty Kinslow, for getting me to Western, helping me obtain my degrees, follow my dreams. To my mom for telling me that I did not have to go to Middle Tennessee, even with a scholarship, and finding a way. She said, I will find a way to get you to WKU instead. To my dad, who was here as well today, and know what he's watching down on us as well, but being proud of my accomplishments, who during his hospital stays would make a point to tell all his nurses and all his doctors that I was Doc Edwards, the head athletic trainer at Western, as if that carried any weight. I know he's looking down on us. To my brothers Kenny and Chris and their families and all my family that are here today, for all your love and support through the years. To my late grandparents, James and Minnie Bess Edwards and B.J. and Vernice White, my father and mother-in-law, Warren and Wilma Willoughby, and my sister-in-law, Linda Nichols, who's with us today, that made the trip from Florida, for all their love and support. They were very kind to me. To my new son-in-laws, Corey Johnson and Will Conley, for their support. This is new to us, having sons in the family, and for taking care of our two daughters. It's a good thing they are WKU alums. That was a prerequisite for marrying them. Not sure they knew that or not, but they did okay. And then thanks to our two gifts from God, our daughters Faith and Rachel, whom I love more than life itself. So thankful and proud that they share our love for Western, for WKU, and that they are proud alumni and they're full of the Western spirit. Thanks for taking care of your dad. All right, I'm about done, y'all. But thanks to my wife, Jenny. Talk about out-punting your coverage. Y'all know what that means? That's exactly what I did when I landed this Glasgow lass. The rock of our family, as Coach Harbaugh would say, the head coach of our family, as Colonel Riggs would say, my boss lady, our family nurse, and my better half. Thanks for all the sacrifices you made while I worked the long hours that this job's required. She only asked me once if I thought I'd be an athletic trainer all my life. I think she had other plans for me, maybe. And after I answered her and told her I felt like that was my calling, she never brought it up again. Thanks for raising our girls to be outstanding young ladies and being there when I couldn't. Thanks for coming to all the games that you came to, home and away, and knowing how much it meant to me when you all were there and I could look up in the stands and see you. Made it a lot more fun. And I've worked 526 football games at Western, so that you can see that. She's been to many of them. She's hung with me through thick and thin, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor. She's a hilltopper, through and through. Thank you, honey, from the depth of my heart. I love you. And in closing, if you haven't already, I hope you catch the Western spirit. It is contagious. And I want to thank the good Lord for making me a hilltopper. Thank you all.
Well done. Thank you, Bill. The Honorable Tom Emberton, Sr., our next recipient, a retired Chief Judge of the Kentucky Court of Appeals. I've been privileged to know Judge Emberton throughout my entire adult life. He was on the Board of Regents when I was just a puppy as a student at WKU, and during that time I recognized his leadership abilities in observing what he was doing at this institution and in his professional career when I was just a young admissions officer at WKU. He's been a leader in service to this university for decades. As a student, as a member of our governing board, as past chair of our Alumni Association board, and as a longtime member of the College Heights Foundation board. I've always been inspired by his dedication and his service, and a bit in all of his capacity to blend an incredible legal career, his public service responsibilities, and his service to this institution and his devotion to his family. Kentucky Supreme Court Chief Justice John Minton, a fellow member of the WKU Hall of Distinguished Alumni, called him a man of admirable humility and great integrity. And that's the definition of a gentleman. Ms. Harriet Downing referred to him as a loyal ambassador, counselor, and advocate for WKU for more than 50 years. And I especially appreciated what Harriet thought Dero Downing would have said were he here today. That Monroe County boy has made his parents proud. Today we honor Judge Tom Emberton for making all of us proud. If you'll move your attention to the screens, please.
Scholarly, confident, humane, a gentleman's gentleman, Tom Emberton has dedicated his life to public service and the greater good. A leader by example, he's left an indelible mark on the political and judicial systems of the Commonwealth.
I found that Tom, to me, is particularly well described by that worthy phrase, a man for all seasons, someone you can count on under all circumstances and at all times. That's what I think Tom Emberton represents.
Growing up in rural Kentucky, the Embertons survived the Great Depression and opened an automobile dealership in Edmonton. But Tom wanted to do something more satisfying. He did a short stint at WKU after high school, but in what is described as a fit of patriotic fervor, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force with the Strategic Air Command, where he served from 1951 through 1955. Emberton then re-enrolled at Western, where the natural-born leader emerged. He was elected president of his sophomore and junior classes and his fraternity, then called the 13ers, now Delta Tau Delta, along with a number of other campus activities.
Other than my family, I can't think of any influence on me in my life that had a greater influence than Western. I don't know where I would be.
From Western, Emberton studied law at the University of Louisville and was admitted to the Kentucky Bar Association in the early 60s.
Soon after I left law school in '62, I returned to my hometown of Edmonton and practiced law there for a while. From there, I went to Frankfurt and worked with Judge Nunn when he was elected governor there. And that sort of was the beginning, I suppose, of what I considered my political career.
In a bold move, the then 39-year-old Emberton ran for governor of Kentucky in 1971, losing in the general election to then Lieutenant Governor Wendell Ford. Fellow young Republican and former campaign coordinator Fred Karam remembers the challenging political climate of the time.
Not only at that time, but even to now, this morning, 45 years later, Kentucky history shows that never has there been a Republican elected to succeed an incumbent Republican governor. So I think his showing, in retrospect, looks very impressive in terms of what he was able to achieve, starting from being a virtual unknown to making that impressive run.
It was an incredible campaign. Unfortunately, we lost the election, but Hal Rogers was in that campaign, and I was, and others. Jim Host was the candidate for lieutenant governor. Tom had a great team. We all admired him incredibly, and it never dawned on me that we might actually lose the election, but we did. But everybody went on to have a great career, most of all Tom in the judiciary. I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of great people in my life. I've never met anybody I more admire than Tom Emberton.
Emberton returned to Edmonton to practice law, made a statewide primary run in 1980 against incumbent Hal Rogers for U.S. Congress. In 1987, he was appointed to the Kentucky Court of Appeals by then-Governor Wallace Wilkinson, re-elected twice, and named Chief Judge of the Appeals Court in 2002, where he served until retiring in 2004.
I truly believe that fate had something to do with Wallace Wilkinson picking Tom to go on the Court of Appeals. Wallace was a Democrat, Tom obviously a Republican. But I think Wallace wanted somebody that would be a superior person, a great nominee to that Court of Appeals bench, one of 14 judges, one of the two in that seventh in that district, and he made a great selection there.
He was always a man of ideas and appealed to, again, the decency in people, the intellectual side of people. He represented a different school of politics from what we see now. Not extreme, not emotional, but a very measured, temperate, humane, bipartisan sort of human being. We don't even know what bipartisan means now. He exemplified it. He was a friend to everyone, regardless of party.
His awards and honors are many, among them serving on the WKU Board of Regents, a past president of the WKU Alumni Association Board of Directors, and recently retiring from the College Heights Foundation Board of Directors. In 2007, the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet named the Thomas D. Emberton Bridge in Metcalfe County in his honor. Emberton is married to the former Julia Lee Crutchfield, and along with the couple's 2 children, are all alumni of WKU. These days, Emberton spends his time tending to his mill race farm in Edmonton.
He could have gone to any metropolitan area in Kentucky, but he chose to come back to Edmonton, and I think Edmonton and Metcalfe County and South Central Kentucky is much better for him because he always involved himself civically and in a leadership role to help. And when somebody needed something, he was always there.
He has a wonderful family. I hope that he can bask in this moment and enjoy it for many years to come. I think it's the culmination of a great career. I don't think anything could please him more than to have this university recognize what he's meant to the state of Kentucky and to Western Kentucky in particular.
You may have lost that run for governor, but you were a winner to many of us throughout your life.
Well, congratulations, Tom. You richly deserve being in the Hall of Fame at Western. You've had a Hall of Fame life. We all admire you.
2016 Hall of Distinguished Alumni inductee, the Honorable Tom Emberton Sr.
It takes a minute when you've come through an hour or so of people congratulating you and renewing old friendships. So I may ask for a respite here of 2 or 3 or 4 minutes at one point or another. However, my remarks relate not necessarily to the history or the beginning of my career or any of the careers that I may have attempted during my lifetime, but there's no way I can give any remarks about Western except positive with A+, A+++. It's one of the great institutions of this country, and it should be remembered, and people should be reminded of that. I want to tell you how much I appreciate the courtesy that I've been shown and the respect that I've been shown. I think, in all probability, I think the staff on this unit has been a lifesaver for me. Tracy Morrison has worn a telephone out calling me if there was anything she could do to make this transition for me easier. She's been wonderful at it, been very successful at it. And Tracy, I want to recognize you and thank you for the help that you've given us here. I also want to thank the Board of governors, for the Alumni Association board chairman, for their confidence in voting for me in this. It's been a difficult road, and I appreciate the understanding and the help that all of you have given me and the honor that you've bestowed upon me. I had only a few remarks that I wanted to make, but I want to recall the telephone call I got from the president about, 6, 8 weeks ago, maybe 6, 8 months ago for that matter. Could have well been. But the first thing he said was, I didn't have any idea what he was calling me about, but he said, you have been selected as one of the 3 people to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. I thought, he's got the wrong person on the line here. And I wanted to call him back and be sure and confirm that it was indeed the president of this university and that he was intending to call me about it. But we went through our conversation, and I said, Mr. President, you must have the wrong person. I said, I don't deserve this. The recognition, celebration shouldn't be for me. It should be for the Western University, one of the great ones of this land. And I said, it's going the wrong way when you give accolades to me. And he said, I can assure you that they voted that way and affirmed it in his own opinion. I appreciate that. I appreciate it very much. And after we hung up from our conversation, I leaned back and finally tried to relax just a little bit. And I thought, boy, I don't deserve this. I just don't deserve it. And the recognition should go the other way. It's Western that should be given the recognition. In other words, I think we're supporting and recognizing the wrong person, but I leaned back in my chair and smiled, though, and enjoyed about 10 minutes of real elation. So I thank the board of directors for the recognition that they have, and the president of this university, too. Even though I recognize the attention, the limit, and so forth that may be imposed, I don't choose to go beyond my 4 or 5 minutes here. I certainly enjoyed the time with Doc E. and his time at this podium. And I wish I could do the same thing, but I'm not prepared to do that, and shall not. Thinking back on what Western has meant to me and to my family, I must say that my opinion is that the attendance at Western is looked at almost as a tradition in my family, beginning in 1909 when my Aunt Olga Ona Pitcock came here as a student. Only, 5, 6, 7 years after the university was founded by General Dan Cherry's grandfather. And we continue to thank General Cherry partly for that too. And After that, my mother was a student here in the late 1920s. Then following her, my sister Janelle and I were students here. Our children, our two children, Laura and Tom Jr., are graduates of Western University. My uncle, Hugh Poland, also a graduate here. And incidentally, he has several of his descendants here today. Uncle Hugh does. I would feel totally in place if I could introduce them. If you will, if you're here as a descendant of Hugh Poland, would you stand up and let us recognize you? There must be a half a dozen or so. Yeah. The thing that I guess I remember most about my time at Western in 1950, soon out of high school, I had grown up mostly in Tompkinsville in Monroe County during the time from my birth in 1932 on up until the war. After the war was over, we moved to Edmonton, and as was mentioned, my father and another uncle put in a business there, a car dealership. And I spent my high school years in Edmonton. The education system there was not necessarily top rate. It is today, and we thank those who have worked at it over those years and made it what it has become today. But the thing that I guess impresses me more than anything about that is when I came here in 1950 and enrolled as a freshman straight out of high school at Edmonton. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know what college even was all about. The only thing I knew was what my mother had taught me through her experiences. And they were helpful. They were helpful. But at the same time, we I'm sorry. I think I very quickly learned what it was to be educated, to have the opportunity to be educated. Although I was here only one semester until I decided to drop out of school for that time and join the United States Air Force. I was given one lesson that I didn't realize was a lesson until some time later, many years later, quite frankly. I was in Miss Gabriel Robertson's history class, and if any of you here are old enough that you remember Mrs. Gabriel Robertson, you can follow pretty well what I'm saying. We were in class, and she gave an example of what her question was going to entail by saying that the Indians were moved from south central Kentucky through the Trail of Tears into southwest United States. Who was mostly responsible for that? She looked through her roll book and said, Mr. Emberton. I thought, oh my God. but I happen to know the answer to that, and I said, President Jackson. Mr. Emberton, would you please go out into the hallway, turn left and go down two doors and go in that office. And to your left when you get in there is a stand with a huge book on it. It's a dictionary. And she said, would you look up the word President and come back and tell the rest of the class how that word is pronounced? And I said, yes, ma'am. So I stood, took my leave of that room and went to the hallway and went down. And I thought, oh, I wish I'd gotten my notebook off my desk and come, because I would go straight to Edmonton without saying a word to anybody. And I didn't have a good feeling toward her for putting me in that position. But as time passed, I remembered what a dictionary was for. And it was a lesson that I have held dear, and that I wish there were more teachers like Gabriel Robertson here now, everywhere, and I'm not talking about just Western. But thank you again to the Alumni Association and the Board of Directors, and to all of those involved in bringing us together here now. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Judge Emerson, I can assure you that this university is indeed recognized by your induction into this Hall of Distinguished Alumni. Our third recipient today, Dr. Chester C. Travelstead. Dr. Travelstead earned a degree from Western Kentucky State College in 1933 and devoted his career to education, retiring as provost from the University of New Mexico in 1977. A colleague described Dr. Travelstead's courage and conviction this way: he has been highly respected by his colleagues, perceived as being highly intelligent, known for his high standards of personal and professional integrity, and viewed as a fine administrator, a proven leader, and a person of limitless ability and energy. In one of his celebrated speeches titled, "The Spirit of a Great University," sounds familiar, Dr. Travelstead said, "The university is a place, but even more, it is a spirit of community in which faculty and students are supported and encouraged to think for themselves, to criticize the values, beliefs, and practices they observe around them, and to dare to design and help bring about what they think is a better society." Indeed. We're honored to house a collection of his manuscripts at the Kentucky Library and Museum, which includes his "I Was There" columns, in which he documents history in personal detail. One of his recollections of growing up on this campus included an account of Dr. Henry Hardin Cherry's disciplinary response for his breaking a campus window. I'd love to know that story. And another is of his efforts as the 10-year-old mascot for Coach Diddle's football and baseball teams. I'm sure there's a story behind that one, too. If you want to know more, you'll have to visit the Kentucky Library. Now, please direct your attention to the video screen as we honor Dr. Chester Coleman Travelstead.
A gifted educator, musician, and unwitting agent of change, Chester Coleman Travelstead was a pragmatist dedicated to justice, purpose, and, above all, education. A graduate of Bowling Green High School and the Kentucky Military Institute, Travelstead attended what was then Western Kentucky State Teachers College, where he met his future wife, Marita Hawley. The couple went on to have 2 children, Coleman and Jim. While on the Hill, he was a member of the band and a yell leader on the Topper Squad. His mother, Nell Gooch, taught music education at WKU for more than 4 decades, the gift of which she passed on to her son, along with an unwavering focus and conviction.
I would say that he was thoughtful, even brilliant. In fact, at Kentucky Military Institute, where he went for 1 year before Western as a prep school, he set an academic record that was never achieved by anyone else until after the school closed. He was fair. He was focused on teacher education, actually, as dean here and then as academic vice president and then as provost. Education of the students and education, particularly in New Mexico, but also nationally, was something that I always felt that he focused on and was very good at.
Travelstead earned a bachelor's degree in French with minors in English and music, earning his master's degree in music from Northwestern University. A PhD in education from the University of Kentucky came later. An accomplished cornet player, he spent several years as a professional jazz musician in New York. After a couple of years in public school administration, he was commissioned into the U.S. Navy as a communications officer on an attack transport in the Pacific. His foray into higher education began in 1951 at the University of Georgia. 2 years later, he was named Dean of the School of Education at the University of South Carolina. It was there that Travelstead would deliver one of 2 speeches that would mark his legacy. The first came in the summer of 1955, just after the Supreme Court handed down the Brown versus the Board of Education ruling.
And my father, speaking at a convention the summer of 1955 of teachers of the state of South Carolina, stated that as part of a relatively long speech, we as educators of the South must begin to prepare for integration. 3 weeks later, he was fired at the University of South Carolina. In some circles, my father was probably referred to as a civil rights activist. I don't think that that's a label that he would accept. He was an activist in anything that he thought was right and necessary to talk about. His primary focus was on education, and in fact, that speech that he gave in South Carolina was not a civil rights activist. It was to educators talking about what educators must do in the future.
50 years later, the University of South Carolina named a seminar room in Chester Travelstead's honor, along with establishing the Travelstead Courage in Education Award. From there, Travelstead became Dean of the University of New Mexico's College of Education, became its first provost, and retired as Provost Emeritus in 1977. There, he touched a number of lives, including a former graduate student whose higher education career was launched when Dean Travelstead gave her her first job.
You know, he had a set of Southern standards, and I was a Yankee from New York, and so that was a revelation to me. But he didn't impose them on anybody, but just knew that about Chester, that he had a certain set of ethics and morals, if you will. He was very smart, very smart. He knew exactly what was going on, and you knew that somehow. He didn't have to flaunt it. You knew that, but he had a certain dignity about him, and that was a little bit intimidating. You have no idea how charming he was.
He had a spirit. In fact, there was a speech that he gave here at the University of New Mexico in 1977 to the Alumni Association as he was nearing retirement, called The Spirit of a Great University. And in fact, that speech was then written up into a pamphlet, and just last year, which would be, almost 40 years later, the present provost of the University of New Mexico passed out a copy to every faculty member on campus.
In 2003, the University of New Mexico's 7-building College of Education complex was named for him. In his retirement, Travelstead remained active as chair of the New Mexico Symphony Orchestra and received a gubernatorial appointment to the New Mexico Judicial Standards Board until his death in 2006.
So Chester, you know, he just planted seeds all over every place that he went. And everybody that met him knew that they had met Chester Travelstead. He was tough, obviously. He couldn't have gotten as far as he did. Couldn't have done what he did, particularly in Kentucky, without being tough. Having a great sense of self. That comes from the spirit. And that's what I tell him is, you know, on behalf of thousands of people, you know, I thank you. I'm one of them. I thank you for how you shaped me in my early years as I started to become an administrator and as a woman.
If he were with us today and here in this room and I were sitting at a table and he were the one up here speaking, I would say, Dad, you told me so many stories about Western and growing up in Bowling Green. I would just say, welcome back.
2016 Hall of Distinguished Alumni inductee, Dr. Chester Coleman Travelstead.
Thank you. Thank the Alumni Association. And I'm sure that my father would be pleased and proud of what you are honoring him with today. The Alumni Association, we've had several events over the last few days, and I thank you for welcoming me back. Actually, New Mexico, that's where I've been growing up for the last many years, but my first memories of home were at Western. My grandmother was a teacher here for 44 years, and I'll come back to that, but when I was a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old boy, about 70 years ago, I spent my summers here on the Western campus. A lot different than today. But in the late 40s, my grandmother was a music educator here, and she would come in to teach teachers in the summer and would turn me loose as a 6-year-old running around campus. And I remember many things about the campus. I remember that rock fort, where I'd play soldier. The rocks were much bigger yesterday than they seem to be today. But I guess that was what a 6-year-old did. Coming back to the campus, I see Margie Helm Library, Florence Snyder Building. They were good friends of my grandmother, and I knew them well. Being back here though over the last 3 or 4 days, I've heard more stories about my grandmother than I have about my father. Lee Robertson was telling me that when he was a student here, he roomed at my grandmother's house out on the Barren River, and that every day he would find on his bed a list of words that he had to learn how to spell and know what they meant. So she was a teacher, and I think that she instilled that in my father. My whole family is from Bowling Green, actually. My grandmother, as I've just mentioned, was raised in Franklin. Her father, my great-grandfather, was Speaker of the House of Kentucky in 1906. My grandmother's social life as a young girl she came from a well-to-do family in Franklin. She had a 3-story house that the 3rd story was a ballroom. So a different life then than we have today. My father was born in Franklin. He went to Bowling Green High. My grandmother on my mother's side was also from Bowling Green. Her father, my mother's father, was a graduate of Potter Bible College that was in existence from 1901 to 1913. I'm not sure exactly when he graduated, but around then. He met my grandmother here. They married and moved to Michigan. During the Depression, my grandfather could not afford to continue my mother at Michigan State, so she came here to Western, where she took music under my grandmother before she even met my father. And they got married, and she had lived down with her aunt and uncle on College at 13th. That house is still there. So my mother graduated in the class of 1934. Though we've got many family archives because the family has a history in Kentucky, and I want to extend my appreciation to the archives at the Western Kentucky, especially Jonathan Jeffrey and Pat Hodges, who have been great in working with we've got pictures, we've got all kinds of memories and everything at the archives. My grandmother married in 1907, and she had 2 children. Will Gooch, her elder son, and 2 years later, Chester, my father. Shortly after my father was born, a couple of years after my father was born, Conley, her husband, and my grandfather told my grandmother that he thought he'd go visit Florida. He never came back. So my grandmother raised 2 children by herself, very unusual in those days. And she was raised as a child in a well-to-do family. Her father was thought to be very wealthy. When she, very shortly after my father was born and Conley left, she found out that it was all smoke and mirrors, and she had no money. So she went and she came to Dr. Cherry, and he gave her a job in 1914. And she was a teacher here for 44 years. So she really had the spirit of that my grandmother gave to my grandfather, or gave to my father, was what I think instilled in him what we saw in that film that Ilsa was talking about, that led his life. So I think that Western had a great deal to do with where he was. Dr. Cherry gave the job to my grandmother, and so later on when I was a child, I was a privilege to be able to come to Kentucky and to Bowling Green and to spend my summers with her. And there were a couple of stories, though, that Dad used to tell or told on him. One was, and both were referred to, about the windows being broken. Well, my father and his brother, although I don't think his brother got caught, were throwing stones at the windows in the old gym and broke some windows. And Dr. Cherry was in his office in Van Meter Hall then and saw that. And he got my father up and he said, "You know, Chester, your mother doesn't have a lot of money, and she probably shouldn't be asked to pay for those windows. So you're going to pay for them. And if you know Van Meter Hall, you'll remember that it's very steep in front of it. Now there's a platform on it, but in the old days, it was nothing but grass." And he gave my father a hand-push lawnmower, and he said, "You'll cut that grass until those windows are paid for." And so my father had to go up and down the steep hills outside of Van Meter and pay for those windows. The other story you mentioned was that Dad was kind of the unofficial mascot of Coach Diddle. And he was going to go on a train trip with him, but Diddle didn't want to pay for Dad's ticket. So they all had bunks. So my dad had to hide under the bottom bunk the entire trip because Diddle didn't want to pay for the tickets. So some great stories about Western. A little more in later life, you saw some of the things that Dad was better known for. The speech that he gave. And I think what is important about that speech is not that he gave it, because it was common sense what he thought, that we as educators of the South must begin to prepare for integration. I mean, that's what you said if you were a pragmatist and if you thought that you really had to plan for the future. Well, you heard about him being fired for that speech, but what you didn't really know was that right after he was fired, he was told, well, if you recant, you get your job back. Well, I think the courage of not recanting was what really distinguished him. He went on to the University of New Mexico. And 50 years later, as you also saw, the University of South Carolina named a room for him on campus, and they refer to it now as the Travelstead Incident. And it's got the termination letter on the wall and his speech and things like that. But what I think was more important is that they established the Travelstead Courage in Education Award that's given to educators of South Carolina that stick their necks out a little bit and are leaders in education and exhibit some courage. At the University of New Mexico is the first and possibly the only minority-majority state. We have a tricultural state with Anglos, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And the Native Americans and Hispanics are the majority in the state. And so it's a different culture, and especially it's rural education because there are a lot of non-native speakers in there. And Dad established, as Dean of the College of Education, a training for rural teachers in secondary, in second languages. And he traveled the state to help establish that. He also worked from the University of New Mexico to work with colleges in Mexico to establish training on UNM campus for teachers in Mexico that could be taught in Spanish. While he was there, he established 2 campuses of the University of New Mexico, one in Quito and one in Bogota, to be able to train teachers, many of whom came back and forth from Ecuador and Colombia to the university campus. He was academic VP, and he was the first provost of the university. So he retired in 1977, and those were the bad old days when you had to retire at 65. And he did a lot of pro bono work at the university. In fact, just bringing it back to Western in a sense, the regent said, well, you know, Travel said, we don't really have any written policies in one place, the policies of the university. So he spent 3 years writing the policies of the university, of every department. He visited departments, worked with them to write the policies. And that book is a huge book today, and it's got a red binder, and it's known as Big Red. So it's not as probably well liked as it is here, that term. But anyway, I want to thank you on my father's behalf. It's a great honor, and I appreciate it on his behalf, and he would be very proud. And my whole family, 4 generations, are in Franklin right now in the cemetery down there. So in a sense, they're home. Thank you.